When most people look at a U.S. aircraft carrier, they see a floating airport, a giant runway at sea, a symbol of power. But what they do not see is the terrifying reality behind that image. When a crisis explodes somewhere on the planet, that ship may have less than 48 hours to transform from routine operations into a fully armed, fully supplied, combat-ready war machine carrying thousands of sailors, dozens of aircraft, and enough destructive power to change the course of a conflict. And what makes it even more incredible is that the carrier is never preparing alone. Behind that one ship stands an entire strike group, a logistics network, a training pipeline, and a war-fighting system designed to move with frightening speed. The reason the U.S. can do this in less than 48 hours is simple. The real preparation did not start when the phone rang. It started months earlier. American carriers rotate through a punishing cycle of maintenance, training, certification, and deployment workups so that when the order comes, the final 48-hour sprint is not about building readiness from zero. It is about compressing a huge amount of fuel, weapons, personnel, intelligence, and command activity into a final surge window. Exercises like COMSUX exist for exactly this reason. To certify that the carrier strike group can fight in sustained high-end combat across air, surface, subsurface, and cyber domains. In one recent workup, Carrier Strike Group completed a 28-day certification period during which Carrier Airwing 7 flew 1,586 sorties and conducted hundreds of arrested landings, proving that rapid war readiness is not theory, it is rehearsed. So what actually happens when the call comes? The first thing is not missiles. It is the order. Somewhere in the chain of command, a decision is made that naval presence is no longer enough. Actual war readiness is required. That order immediately starts a countdown across the entire carrier ecosystem. The carrier itself begins emergency preparation. The air wing starts generating aircraft and crews. Escort ships align movement plans. Supply officers start calculating burn rates for fuel, food, spare parts, and munitions. Intelligence teams begin updating threat maps and target environments. And damage control leaders begin preparing the ship not just to fight, but to survive being hit. In other words, the first hours are about switching the carrier from a peacetime rhythm into a combat rhythm. One of the most important changes happens deep inside the ship, far away from the glamorous images of jets launching off the deck. The crew begins setting stricter material conditions of readiness, especially the famous Navy condition called Zebra. On warships, material conditions like X-ray, yoke, and Zebra determine which doors, hatches, fittings, and ventilation boundaries are open or shut. Zebra is the highest normal state, associated with wartime survivability and severe damage threats. It is the ship's way of sealing itself into a tougher, more survivable organism. If fire erupts, if flooding begins, if toxic contamination spreads, Zebra slows the disaster. And on a carrier, where a single mistake can cascade through fuel lines, weapons, machinery spaces, and berthing compartments, that survivability posture matters as much as any missile battery. That may sound procedural, but it is life or death. The Navy's own compartmentation and watertight integrity guidance warns that losing watertight integrity through negligence, bad seals, loose fittings, or open closures creates pathways for progressive flooding and can lead to almost certain doom. That is why, when a carrier prepares for war, some of the most urgent work is invisible. Inspecting fittings, confirming closure logs, checking hatches, validating damage control markings, testing equipment, and making sure the ship can absorb punishment without dying from internal chaos. A carrier is too large and too vital to rely on armor alone. Its real defense is layered survivability, compartmentation, trained repair parties, disciplined procedures, and immediate response. And that brings us to one of the most underestimated parts of the 48-hour sprint: fast cruise and high-intensity shipboard drills. Before major sea periods, carriers often conduct fast cruise-style events while still pierside, simulating the tempo of life underway. On Gerald R. Ford, a 5-day fast cruise trained sailors in navigation, damage control, and ship-wide operations before sea trials, and the ship was described as warship-ready. That matters because the first 48 hours of real war preparation are not just about loading things. They are about forcing thousands of people to shift instantly into the exhausting routines of a combat vessel that may soon operate 24 hours a day under lethal pressure. Then comes the fuel. A carrier cannot surge for war unless it can move, and it cannot sustain movement unless its logistics pipeline is already alive. This is where the U.S. Navy's century-old mastery of underway replenishment becomes a strategic weapon. Replenishment ships can transfer fuel, food, mail, spare parts, and ammunition while warships are still at sea, allowing the strike group to keep moving instead of returning to port. One Navy account described USNS Arctic delivering 677,000 gallons of fuel in less than 24 hours while supporting multiple warships. Another described carrier supply operations handling 600 to 700 pallets in a single replenishment event lasting 10 to 15 hours. That means the final 48-hour war prep window is not just a dockside scramble. It is the handoff from fixed base support to a mobile combat logistics chain that follows the carrier across oceans. But fuel alone does not make a carrier dangerous. Ordnance does. Once war preparation accelerates, the flight deck and weapons departments begin one of the most dangerous and tightly choreographed evolutions in the Navy. Loading bombs, missiles, rockets, and ammunition safely onto a ship packed with aircraft fuel, electrical systems, and thousands of people. This is where modern combat power is physically assembled. And the scale is staggering. In one at-sea ordnance onload, Harry S. Truman took on roughly 3.9 million pounds of ordnance, about 1,340 pallets, over just a few days. In another case, Gerald R. Ford received about 541,000 pounds of ammunition, involving more than 400 sailors using both connected replenishment and helicopter lifts. Those numbers show why the last 48 hours before war are so intense. Every bomb loaded is both power and risk. And this is exactly why U.S. carriers obsess over safety drills and damage control. History taught the Navy that an aircraft carrier can be crippled not only by enemy action, but by seconds of chaos on its own flight deck. The 1967 USS Forrestal fire began when an accidental rocket launch struck a fuel tank, leading to catastrophic explosions within minutes. The disaster killed 134 sailors, injured 161, and destroyed or damaged dozens of aircraft. In 1969, the USS Enterprise suffered another devastating fire after a Zuni rocket was overheated by exhaust equipment, touching off explosions, fuel fires, and major deck damage that killed 28 sailors and injured 314. These incidents permanently changed carrier ordnance handling, firefighting training, deck washdown systems, and emergency response doctrine. So when a carrier prepares for war in 48 hours, it is not just loading weapons fast. It is loading them under procedures written in blood. At the same time, the carrier Airwing is being transformed from a peacetime flying organization into a combat-ready striking arm. The Airwing typically brings around 2,400 personnel and multiple squadrons into the carrier's warfighting ecosystem. During certification exercises, these squadrons prove they can launch, recover, arm, refuel, repair, and relaunch aircraft day and night under relentless tempo. That matters because the first 48 hours of war preparation are not only about getting jets aboard. They are about ensuring every aircraft has the right maintenance status, mission systems, weapons load compatibility, trained crews, flight schedules, and launch priorities. A carrier without a ready air wing is just a very expensive ship. A carrier with a synchronized air wing becomes a mobile airbase capable of deep strike, fleet defense, electronic warfare, surveillance, and sustained combat sorties. And while aircraft are being readied above, something equally important is happening below deck. The ship is building muscle memory for surviving attack. General quarters drills are a central part of this. Navy reporting on Dwight D. Eisenhower described bi-weekly GQ drills that simulate missile attacks and force all hands to move instantly into battle stations. The logic is brutal and simple. In real combat, no one has time to think through their role from scratch. If the ship takes a hit, sailors must already know where to run, what to shut, what to fight, what to isolate, and how to keep the ship alive while operations continue. In the final 48 hours before combat deployment, these routines stop being training events and become the crew's survival script. The damage control system behind that response is immense. According to Navy historical writing, carriers organize repair parties across different zones and functions, including areas for main deck, forward, after, amidships, propulsion, ordnance, aviation fuel, and electronics. Specialized teams exist for aviation fuel emergencies, crash and salvage, and explosive ordnance disposal, all feeding into the ship's damage control assistant and damage control central. That matters because a carrier under wartime pressure is not fighting one battle. It may be fighting dozens of micro-battles at once. A fuel leak in one compartment, smoke in another, an electrical casualty here, a flight deck crash there, and a need to keep launching aircraft through it all. The final 48-hour preparation window is about making sure all those repair ecosystems are awake, manned, equipped, and coordinated. Then there is the human factor, the part most people underestimate. A nuclear-powered aircraft carrier may be one of the most advanced machines on Earth, but it still runs on human endurance. Thousands of sailors must be fed, birthed, medically supported, assigned, briefed, and psychologically shifted into wartime rhythm almost overnight. Carrier supply departments plan for food stocks that can sustain roughly 5,000 personnel for extended periods, and replenishment reporting shows just how large those demands are. A single carrier can require provisions for 45 days, while support operations move hundreds of pallets of cargo and supplies to keep that floating city functional. So the first 48 hours are not only about weapons and strategy. They are about making sure the crew can keep fighting after the first sleepless night, the first casualty report, and the first week at sea. Now zoom out from the carrier itself. Because the United States does not send a carrier to war alone. It sends a carrier strike group. That means destroyers, often cruisers, logistics ships, submarines in the wider picture, and an integrated command structure that ties all of them together. COMPSUEX and group sail events exist to make sure those ships can move as a single combat organism. The escort ships screen against submarines, missiles, aircraft, and surface threats. Their sensors and weapons expand the carrier's survivability bubble. Their commanders share tactical data and air defense responsibilities. So when the carrier is being prepared in less than 48 hours, the truth is even bigger. The U.S. is preparing an entire naval ecosystem to fight as one. That is why the phrase 48 hours can be misleading. It sounds like America is improvising a warship in 2 days. It is not. What the U.S. is really doing is activating a system that has been trained, inspected, and stress-tested for months. The carrier may receive emergency ordnance, fuel, and supply loads in the final hours. The crew may intensify damage control posture, readiness conditions, and battle drills. Intelligence and command networks may shift to crisis mode. But none of that works unless the ship was already maintained to high standards and already certified to fight. The speed is real, but it rests on deep preparation. And that may be the most terrifying part of all. Because once that system is activated, the carrier becomes something far more than a ship. It becomes a sovereign chunk of American combat power that can cross oceans without asking anyone's permission, carry its own air force, defend itself with layered escorts, replenish at sea, and remain on station for months. A nation can threaten. A carrier strike group can arrive. That is why adversaries watch them so closely. That is why deployments trigger headlines. And that is why the final 48-hour sprint matters. It is the moment a symbol becomes a weapon. But even then, the ship's greatest strength is not just steel, reactors, or aircraft. It is discipline. Every hatch dogged down. Every ordnance pallet counted. Every firefighting team drilled. Every pilot briefed. Every repair locker manned. Every replenishment planned. Every watchstander awake. The U.S. Navy learned long ago that carriers do not survive because they are invincible. They survive because thousands of people perform thousands of small tasks correctly under pressure. And when those tasks are executed at combat tempo, the result is a warship that can move from routine posture to lethal readiness with astonishing speed. So if a crisis erupts tonight, and a U.S. aircraft carrier is ordered to prepare for war in less than 48 hours, here is what that really means. It means the ship seals itself for survival. It means the crew shifts into combat routines. It means bombs and missiles begin flowing aboard under extreme safety controls. It means fuel, food, and spare parts are pushed through one of the most sophisticated naval logistics systems on Earth. It means the Airwing turns from a collection of squadrons into a 24-hour strike engine. It means the strike group forms its defensive ring. It means thousands of sailors prepare not just to attack, but to absorb chaos and keep fighting. And it means that when the carrier finally leaves port or surges deeper into theater, the world is no longer looking at preparation. It is looking at the opening move of war.